All right, great. Welcome everyone to this webinar on recombinant relationship management in universities. We're sorry to be starting a bit late, a bit of technical difficulties that we unfortunately ran into, but we'll now go ahead. Just for your information, the webinar is being recorded and a recording will later be made available. So my name is Kari Poltonen and I'm the Global Industry Lead for Education at Fluido. Fluido is a consultancy based in Finland and covering with 500 individuals the European market, including Nordic countries, UKI, Germany, Benelux region, and specialized in Salesforce. You can find out more about us at fluidogroup.com/industries. And we are also an independent part of Infosys Group, and with our global education practice, we have more than 15 years of experience working in the education industry. But now let's go into the topic at hand. So, in the pressures of increasing competition and tight funding, how can universities work better together with industry partners and the wider community to deliver value and innovate? How do you build lasting strategic partnerships? What decisions can you make to bring people, process, culture, and technology in a fusion that drives impact? We're here to discuss these topics and more with a brilliant set of panelists who I will now have the pleasure to introduce. So we have for you today Dr. Marta Herrero, Subject Head of Creative Industries Management and Senior Lecturer in Creative Industries Management at the University of York. Welcome, Marta. We have Dr. Dave Fitch, Freelance Project Director and Program Manager, Salesforce Mechanic and former COO of the Data Lab. Welcome, Dave. We also have Stuart Cronin, Head of Business Engagement and Development in Innovation and Enterprise at the University of Stirling. And finally, we have Dr. Brendan McGuckin, former NASA scientist, consultant, and former Director of Commercialization and Knowledge Transfer at Edinburgh Napier University. I think Brendan is still attempting to join the call. Moderating the session will be our very own education lead for UKI, Alan Hughes. Hope you enjoy the session. Now take it away, Alan.
I will do. Thanks very much. The UK university sector has never faced greater threats or uncertainties. The reach of universities goes far beyond education and has impact on businesses, non-governmental organisations and individuals. So how do you manage those threats and take care of those relationships and opportunities? Dave, you've had experience of this when you were at Data Lab. Do you want to kick us off?
I think, well, firstly, hello everybody. I think you're right to say we are in a period of uncertainty like we've never seen before. Many of the things that we've always assumed have been found recently to not be true. We always have views about what our markets are like, who our students are, what countries we deal with, where students are coming from, so on and so on. But we're now in a position where many of the things that we relied upon are now uncertain, and universities are increasingly expected to pivot and do different things. And it's really important to kind of understand, before you try and pivot to something new, to understand actually what are you doing now, where are you, and then you understand what these pivots, what these threats actually do mean to you. If you're an organization, for example, that doesn't rely on Chinese students, crackdown on Chinese students probably doesn't affect you. Other organizations will be really affected, and then you need to understand what actually are we doing and what do we need to do differently.
No, that's great. Stuart, do you get any add to that?
Yeah, probably more just from that kind of business side of things when we're working one-on-one with businesses, just to making sure that, when they're going through challenges, which so many businesses are just now, how can we work with them and look at routes to kind of support what they're looking to do? So, they've maybe got a challenge or a space they're looking for support in, where they're likely to get funding from that. So it's obviously one of the biggest challenges for everyone is there's like a great opportunity, but how do we get funding and how do we deliver that together? So it's about coming from the business development side of thing, working very closely and account managing those businesses to understand what those are, then linking them in with the correct faculty and academics, and then when we've got a kind of idea of what that looks like, look at where the best funding route that is, whether it be Innovate or a KTP or whatever that looks like and whatever the best solution is. So really working closely with them and supporting them and advising them where we can look for opportunity, and also for them perhaps tapping more into the student kind of talent pool and things. There might be opportunities there to help them out that's a little bit different and a little bit more supportive. It doesn't have the cost, but they get that kind of really good link to the university and what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that it's more than what the university gets from the relationship. It's clear the university enables the sectors it touches. So, Marta, how do you see the role of a university in aiding fundraisers within the arts and cultural sectors and beyond, navigate challenges posed by, for example, the pandemic?
Well, actually, I do think about fundraising in many ways, and one is to do with the arts and culture sector, but also around universities, which will be another topic here. But I think one of the problems that we have in the arts and culture sector, especially when it comes to fundraising and thinking that we have a sector that it's mixed income, is that we have what it's called, or what I call the perfect storm. The reason being that we have a sector in which, if you look at the statistics for voluntary giving in the UK, is the sector that gets the lowest voluntary donations with 1%. This is for the arts. Heritage gets 4%, which is a little bit higher, but we're still really at the low end of people wanting to give money. So that's one thing. And when it comes to then fundraising, is what can fundraisers actually do to encourage giving and to create a model of funding that is sustainable? And that is the other challenge, because what my research indicated, which I did during COVID-19, and now things are slightly different, but not overall, 100% better, is that there is a big disparity, especially when it comes to access to digital technologies for fundraising and public engagement across the sector. So you have the big arts organizations that are doing relatively better in terms of engaging, using digital, bringing people in. That was the absolutely essential to engage and hopefully, but what is happening is also that now with the arrival, not arrival, but with the more accessibility of AI, this disparity of digital within the sector, and especially fundraising, is made even wider. So I do not have solutions, but I do think this is an opportunity to start looking into these sectors seriously and start developing solutions that are long-term. And we can talk about it afterwards about how I think that can happen, because we did touch upon, relationships between academia and externals, but that is one way of going on about it. So these are my views so far on the question you've asked me. I can stop here and then
no, that's perfect. You could go on a little bit, Marta. You talked about the some of the research projects that you've been involved in, and you mentioned to me previously about the kind of residual skills and resources that were left there as well.
Okay, so I'll keep going for a bit longer. That's fine. Thank you for the time. So what we've been doing really is working with external partners, which are non-profit organizations, especially very small ones, to understand how we can bring in digital technologies to support their fundraising and public engagement. And from a research point of view, the first thing that we do is try to understand the organization. So we do a lot of research, we do interviews, we do a few surveys, and then we create what we call these outputs, or things that are technological. So we create an interactive documentary. People could access it from different standpoints and could understand what, in this case, what was archaeology and how people from ethnic backgrounds that are minority backgrounds engage with it. And that was really interesting, and we created that. We also produced virtual reality films that were trying to portray what the organization did, their activities. But then we sort of reach a point of stagnation in which we as a university produce a research output that is a technology, but then the nonprofit really struggles with how do we update this technology, how we can create more content that continues to be relevant, and how do we go on about assessing the success or not. So how do we have a metric system that is going to help us assess that? Now, of course, from our point of view, the research funding ended, and all we can do is keep going, but without any financial income. And this is when I think businesses need to come in, and that's what we're trying to look at, the three sort of part relationship, where we can engage with them and say, we do need really strongly to support the nonprofit sector. How can we do that? By bringing together research, nonprofits plus the community.
So it's almost another role for universities. It's almost universities as a broker between businesses and the non-profit sector there as well. Yeah, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So, Stuart, can I ask you a question about the human element of it? Because we've covered a bit on the technology side of things there. What strategies does your institution employ to prioritise and support the kind of human element alongside the sort of process and technology things we've been talking about here?
Yeah, I think it's that relationship side to it. Again, I've probably gone a bit about account management and how you support businesses, but I think that's probably the most important and effective way of doing it. So, you know, I've got a business development team by, you know, being able to assign account managers to organisations that allows them to go in and speak to the organisations and learn about them and understand, you know, what the opportunities are there to support them and what their challenges are. But I think more importantly, from a university perspective, it's really making it clear to businesses how they can get involved and work with us. I think we like to overcomplicate things at times and make it more difficult. So it's, you know, speaking plain English. You know, this might be the opportunity. We might have a 10-page PDF, but actually in, you know, 4 or 5 bullet points, how can we actually say this is actually what the opportunity is, and this is how it can benefit you? And I think that goes across all sectors, whether it's, you know, whether it's third sector, private, public. I think they all appreciate that. And kind of an extension of that is, you know, when a business, particularly the kind of first or second time they're looking to engage with the university, they find it really difficult to find out where to start. How do we go about that? So it's really important that, you know, we know what that process looks like internally. And because if you think about how big a university can be, obviously varying size, but even the smaller ones are quite big. They could come in from any point. You know, it could be an academic relationship, it could be from professional services, it could be from my team. So it's important that whoever's dealing with them knows where they can get support to then kind of enable them to progress and work with them. So really it's that account management and support, regardless of what business or sector they're coming from.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, how integral is data management and analysis to universities' knowledge transfer initiatives? And how do you ensure that data-driven insight is effectively utilised to maximise the impact on tech transfer, commercialisation efforts, or industry collaborations? I'm bouncing it back to you again, Stuart.
Yeah, it's really important for us to be able to see what's going on across the board, what all the opportunities are, who we're working with, what we're doing with them, where things are maybe picking up and where things are maybe dropping off, because if we don't know that, then it's very hard to kind of focus efforts. And then it comes back to, you know, where are the funding opportunities? So a bit of kind of horizon scanning, if you want. We need to know what's coming up in the next couple of years, when funding's going to end. So this thing's going to end in 2 years, but there's this other piece that might come along that might be of interest to you. And I think all client data, so if we're talking about hosting it in a CRM or wherever we are hosting it, is essential for not just business development, but all different teams. So whether that be from a kind of management perspective to kind of look at where the opportunities are going and what the kind of pipeline's looking like, or when we are putting kind of research bids, you know, it's probably useful for the kind of bids that Marta was talking about. If, you know, if there was a team like mine that you're working with and we were able to say, well, we're already working with these 40 organisations in the third sector, we're doing this type of stuff with them, and then they could tap into that. So sometimes it's not only just about the pipeline, but it's about that kind of, you know, business intelligence, who we're working with already, that can then go into kind of research bids and kind of bridge that gap and bring that whole thing together, because obviously that's becoming more and more important, and businesses are becoming more and more involved in business partnerships around kind of research activity, as well as that kind of practical side of it as well.
Okay, can I ask you a question, Stuart? I'll just move on to you. How does a university foster and facilitate knowledge exchange between faculty, students, and external stakeholders?
Yeah, I think the easiest route, best route for that is through work-based learning opportunities, and how you can go about that. So that's looking at things like student placements, student projects, and that really brings the, you know, kind of what the students are studying to life, and it also bridges that gap quite quickly. And you know, across universities, there's always so many opportunities to do that. So, you know, most faculty, particularly the University of Stirling, will have an opportunity for work-based learning, and it's obviously a growing area. And again, it comes across, the best way to do that is through that account management model, to understand where those kind of gaps might be, because it's a good way for people to kind of look at talent and that kind of long-term talent stream, because obviously that's a huge, particularly in Scotland, that's a real issue, but I'm assuming that's an issue worldwide, especially for certain skills, you know, data and all these types of things. So it's really about understanding what that opportunity is, and then aligning it to the work-based learning process or opportunity that fits their needs the most. So whether that is a placement in, you know, from the management school, or, you know, from aquaculture, or whoever it is, and then kind of putting them in place to kind of do that. So I think work-based learning is obviously the obvious one I would say that we can keep building on. And I think from my experience, organisations really like getting involved with that. And actually, sometimes that's a nice starting point for an organisation to work with university, to just get used to how we talk and how it works and the processes and the systems. And then that could maybe lead on to maybe a wider business development opportunity where we look at either a collaborative bid or a bit of you know, innovation, or a K2P, or whatever that looks like at that point.
Yeah. Dave, do you want to expand on that?
I think, you know, to some degree, one of the big challenges that we all face is actually around data and storytelling, because, you know, a university is an enormous, diverse collection of silos. You know, and quite often, you know, as a university, you don't understand what's going on in the colleges. Colleges don't understand what's going on in the schools. Schools don't understand what's going on at the end of the corridor, not to mention in the next 3 buildings. And it's really important to be able to tell a story about who you are and what you do. Because one of the challenges universities have is that you have so many different audiences simultaneously who are looking for really different things. And it's about how can you use data and your platforms and your processes to pull together this story, so you can tell, for example, how many people in the medical school are working on certain types of diseases, how many people are collaborating across the university to do different things, how many people across the university are collaborating with other people. One of the key challenges we had at the data lab was, well, people were super interested in what your impact was. There was also an inordinate focus on process and activities and volumes and how many people have you talked to, how many organizations have you engaged with, so on and so on and so on. And it became really important for us to actually build platforms that allowed us to do all of that while we were doing the real work. You know, we didn't need to focus on how do you track everything, because our job is to try and deliver impact. But you need a set of processes and platforms that allow you to monitor what you're doing, so you can tell this story to other people. You know, so if you want to convince somebody that there's an area of interest, you can talk about how many firms you've talked to, you can talk about where the money's going, how many people you've funded, perhaps how many new people you've funded. When I used to work at the UK Carbon Capture and Storage Research Centre, that was one of the metrics we used for talking about impact, was the number of new people we were talking to, the number of new universities that we'd funded. And having all the data in one place actually makes it easy to tell your story. And I think in this environment, that's the key challenge for UK universities, is to be able to tell clear stories about who they are, what they do, and why that's relevant. So you get back to your original question about threats. You know, the key thing is, once you understand the threat, to be able to talk about how it affects you. Because one of the things we see right now is universities are buffeted by lots of external change, but they aren't really able to talk, you know, in a way that actually cuts through to say how some of these changes potentially affect them.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Marta, can I expand on that? You know, we've talked before about alumni and what they bring to the university, and the value of a strong alumni network, not just the kind of the commercial aspect of it, but also to potentially the research aspect of it all. Do you want to expand on that?
Sure, yeah. I do like Dave's point about the importance of storytelling, because I think it's essential. Even though when I think about storytelling, I have a fundraising hat on my head, thinking about, you know, fundraising for storytelling for fundraising. So that is sort of my main focus. But I think one of the issues that universities are having is, apart from the complexities of a changing geopolitical environment, where we don't even know where our next cohort of students is going to come from, apart from the fact that numbers are going down. I think what we've had so far, and this is something that perhaps we can rely a little bit on, student numbers being relatively steady, but I'm not going to hold on myself to that one, is the relationship, especially when it comes to business and management subjects, with Chinese students. So in my last 15 years, I've been teaching management and business in different universities. And the 98% of my students, and I'm talking about postgraduates, have been from China. And one of the challenges that universities have in my view, is to be able to engage with those students that stay 1 year at university and then they go away as alumni. So there are two things that universities need to do. First of all, how to engage with them while they're here in the UK to make sure that that bond with the university, once they go away, remains strong. And the other thing then to do, which is even more challenging, is how to continue an engagement with those students once they move away. And that is very challenging. I'm not here to tell you that I have the answer to these questions, but what I'm here to tell you is that I'm looking to understand better this cohort of students. And I think one of the ways forward is to engage with them through research. And this is what I'm doing with colleagues in the School for Business and Society. So we're looking at doing a survey and doing interviews, which is going to be focusing on barriers to integration and adaptability, especially focusing on that cohort, which is Chinese students that are studying business and management at York. So, and then once you have that data, so I don't know about data analysis, but I do know about what gaps we have in data. And I think that is a gap that we have. Once you have that data and that understanding, you can start thinking more clearly about what can universities do to engage with these students as alumni. Because I do not believe from my very sort of specific experience that I have, that we are doing as much as we could do. And it's something that bringing universities together, researchers with fundraisers in universities, and this is happening at York, is something that we can work together, we can collaborate, and we can move forward, and we can look into solutions for that sort of creating that type of engagement.
No, that sounds that's really interesting, and you're getting to understand more about alumni so that they are more valuable going forward. You know, that would be critical. Getting to that sort of point with it. Brendan, I don't know if you can hear me. Well, I was just going to ask you to expand on that alumni point. I know that you had some good examples.
I think that in listening in, the importance of pulling together data from currently what is oftentimes disparate nodes across the university can be a challenge. The value in doing so is enormous. That includes alumni. Now, equally, we all work in universities and we know how possessive people can be over the data. And oftentimes it's the integrated data that we're wanting. One way to track your alumni is using LinkedIn Premium. And you can search alumni by sector, by company, etc. Once you've done your foresighting and build up a profile. I know in the past we have used alumni in influential roles within target companies to effect introduction to provide an important route or an efficient route to the decision makers. And that's the key element of the data that you require, is understand your own profile, your own institution, but the target business as well. And this is where Salesforce comes in and is a priceless tool in this respect. And if you use LinkedIn Premium, then you can connect your LinkedIn searches directly to Salesforce, avoiding an awful lot of effort and work. So alumni are a priceless asset for the university. And of course, by registering with LinkedIn Premium, they themselves have declared that they're open for contact. So you don't have to worry about GDPR issues, etc. Excellent.
So I suppose, you know, the kind of research that Marta was talking about that give you a better understanding of a group of students before they became alumni would be super useful in terms of moving on to the piece of work that you're talking about and looking to expand that kind of reach of the university way beyond where it might think it lands just now.
Well, alumni about to leave the university are important ambassadors for that institution, and using them, being able to track their footprint as they move on into the outside world is an invaluable asset. It's just this possessiveness and correct possessiveness over those databases. And sharing them with the commercial services office can often be a challenge. That's why I was suggesting that the alternative route, the LinkedIn Premium utility, which can be connected. We've all talked about data and the integration of data. There's no better place to do that than in an effective and an efficient CRM system.
This seems like a perfect point to bring you in, Dave. About how central is the role of data in informing decision making and fostering collaboration for mutually beneficial outcomes? I mean, what Brendan's talked about there is really valuable bits of information around the university that aren't at your fingertips where they possibly should be.
I think data is actually really key to being able to tell a story, particularly to certain types of stakeholders, because they don't want anecdote. They want to know, what are you doing? How much money is going in there? What impact is coming from this money? Now, how many people are you reaching? How many companies are you talking to? And because I think one of the big challenges is that many people work at universities, but they don't feel that they work for universities. And when you're trying to get data and build collaboration across silos, quite often that is a real challenge. I remember being really struck because there's one period about 6 years ago where the College of Science and Engineering probably had over £50 million worth of grants focusing on low carbon, but it didn't know that. The researchers didn't talk to each other, nobody facilitated anything, so you weren't able to tell the story of actually all the things that you were doing that would have been fascinating to alumni, to students, to stakeholders, to funders. Data is really key, actually, particularly if you start talking about what's your impact been, what's been the scale of what you've done, and what's been the impact of what you've done. And then data really is key, because you see in a lot of organizations, when they start talking about data, it's very anecdotal. But for many funders, they want to know, how many people have used these platforms? How many people have you engaged with? How much money have people saved because of things that you've done? And it's the only way you're going to be able to pull that together is through, a very formal program to collect data, across organizations. Now, I realize for many people that's a definition of hell, but the reality is, if you don't understand what's going on in your organization, it's really hard to engage with certain people outside your organization because you can't tell the story that they want to hear. And a lot of times data is the key to showing that actually you understand what you're doing, you're in control of what you're doing, and you are able to deliver the sort of impacts that they would like to see.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the classic example of an organisation being seen in the whole by its partners, but itself only seen from the area it's in, whether it's alumni, whether it's business development. But Brendan, do you have any examples of where leveraged data has contributed to these sort of partnerships?
Yeah, well, without mentioning the corporate name, just to touch on a point that Dave made, it's critical to understand the full extent of your own organisation's outreach. It's equally important to understand the number of touch points that these target businesses can have with the university. We found one global company of scale that was a target for the university that was working with 6 academics, 8 different projects cut across 3 colleges or faculties. They recruited large numbers of graduates every year. That we knew from the LinkedIn premium searching that key managers, key decision makers within the business were alumni. The business didn't know this. As the university was reaching out to them, and they saw, so the target business saw considerable benefit in streamlining its own outreach, its own touch points with the university. And you'll find that the ability to quantify and present the full range of the number of touch points of a target business across institutions is vital, priceless. It's very illuminating.
Yeah. It's given the evolving landscape of funding in higher education in the UK, how do you perceive the role of data evolving in demonstrating accountability, securing funding, driving the strategic decision making in a university? And I'll ask that to you, Brendan, first instance.
Oh, it's critical. The B word, Brexit, it was a big change in terms of the funding. I know some things have changed recently. The ability to engage with global, international companies of scale who have the resources, this is what we have found, who have the resources, are investing in the areas anyway, to engage with their technology leaders, to afford them the opportunity to influence the direction of research within the institution, which puts them ahead of the game, accelerates their own productivity, profit development, that's their KPIs, through funding the university through a more streamlined and efficient and effective relationship with the university is valuable on both sides. There's just one thing I'd like to mention. It's an internal barrier often can be the academics' willingness to be more open and to release their relationship rather than work in combination with other academics who are part of the same, have different touch points with the business. But we've found that when you present the whole perspective, all the touch points that a target business has with the institution, it's often illuminating for them, and it stimulates their desire to streamline and make it more effective to capitalise on their investment. And through that, we can access additional funding streams. And it can often be integrated with an international strategy. We've found that many target businesses are North American, Far East. It's quite obvious.
That's Dave. I was going to ask if you wanted to expand on some of those points around the way that the data is evolving to change the way we look at accountability, funding, and strategic decision making.
I think, as I said, storytelling is really key to a lot of this, and the sort of stories that funders want to hear is changing as well. So quite often it's not just what do you want to do right now, but what did you do 5 years ago? Did that work? What was the impact of that? And data is quite often is really key to understanding some of this, to understanding you need to be able to tell a coherent story over time about what you've done, how you've worked with the different people, what your reach, what your impact has been, and so on and so on. And I think it's really key to understand how you can do some of these things more effectively. I mean, the underlying question for much of this is actually about the culture in your organization and how you develop the culture in your organization so people understand we all work here, we all have responsibilities. You know, everyone, you know, you had a situation 5 years ago where everyone who had a research grant had their own mailing list, you know, and then GDPR comes along and is like, how many people are you paying? How many people in your organization have MailChimp accounts? You know, you start wondering, actually, you know, you've got all of these organizational questions about how you can support people internally to then be more effective externally. And I think data is kind of one of the key ways to understanding this, but it's also the way you get people to understand. If you say, look at lots of European projects, they're designed so that the numbers roll up. So you can say, this project reached 5,000 people on this subject, this other project reached 10,000 people, and they want to be able to add the numbers up to talk about their effects, their impact at scale. And if you want to talk about the scale of your impact, you're going to have to do that through data. Yeah. You know, you can have a good story, but you need some numbers in it. And understanding that actually everyone needs to work together to contribute to this is going to be one of the key challenges for universities. But then the key challenge is also you need to do this in a way that works for everybody. You can't just go, hi, I've got another platform, it doesn't talk to any of the existing platforms, and you're going to use this, because people aren't going to use it. You know, if you want data to be real, you've got a cultural challenge, and that's, you know, one of your capacity development hurdles is how do you give people the capacity to do all of these things.
One of the things you said today about being real data reminded me of something that Stuart had said to me previously about being interested in failure data as much as he was in the things that had worked. You know, you talked about the 5 years. You know, what people want to know about 5 years hence and taking it forward. And we were speaking before, Stuart. You know, you mentioned the importance of knowing where you went wrong, and that being a real source of potential growth and innovation going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No, why did something not happen, or what could we have done better to make it happen? I think it's essential learning for any team, not just business development, but across a university. You know, or was it a funding thing, or was there a better university, a better option? Why was it a better option? So it just allows you as a team to review what you're kind of looking at, and then do it better next time, and hopefully allows you to kind of increase engagement with different businesses as well. One of the, I was Brendan just at one point around, you know, talking about where academics holding on to relationships. How do you kind of see, or how do you go about that to kind of evolve that and kind of bring it and open it up? And one of the things I always talk about is obviously account management, but internal account management. How do we work internally with our academic colleagues to do that kind of stuff better? You know, is it more about, you know, building that relationship up so that there's a trust and then you're doing it, or just interested in your thoughts on it, given your experience?
Yeah. I think it's a challenge, and I should say that this activity, this strategic relationship development, isn't a displacement activity. It's not intended to displace normal pursuit of research funding, which is typically responsive mode. This has to be proactive. Being able to articulate the benefit to the academic from additional funding, additional pathways to impact that may arise from operating in partnership with his other academics, responding to an industry demand, can be productive. I would say another benefit for this approach is the following. Grant funding is typically government funding. Who does government talk to? Government talks to industry, and a government's willing to invest where it will provide a return on jobs, security in the country, etc. The main influencers are the big decision makers within the corporations. Some of the companies that we have engaged with successfully, it's academics who hadn't hitherto worked with fellow colleagues in the institution. Others have made that comment that they work for themselves within a university. And so there's new opportunities arrive at important crossovers where there's a core technology. A very common one now is expertise in artificial intelligence, being applied in renewables, being applied in creative sector, being applied all healthcare, etc. It's the additional opportunities that arise from those combinations that arouses interest. Yeah. But it's still, and I'm sure you all recognise, embarking on this, getting stakeholder buy-in is a critical first step, that your key academics are up for it, want to do it. But the possibilities and the potential is very large, especially in looking at these crossovers where a core technology can be applied in multiple different sectors. But bringing the academics with you, as in any initiative like this, is critical. Otherwise, it's like, we all know, can be like pushing water uphill. Yeah. But the benefits are enormous. Because for the institution are enormous, because you're fusing together currently disparate nodes from across the university and presenting these touch points to businesses, which are often unaware. Seen that many times. Oh, I didn't realise. Gee whiz, we're doing that amount of work. Incredible.
So with that in mind, you know, Dave, how can an institution plan to leverage the data to adopt it to potential changes in funding priorities and these requirements of the future that Brendan's talked about there? Now that's a $62,000 question, but I'm pointing at you right now.
I think there's a real cultural challenge in this, because actually it's not about platforms. It's about people and how people work together, what their expectations are. You only get a research grant at the university if the university signs off on it. You know, you don't get it because you're lovely. You got it because a multi-billion-dollar charity signs the checks. But you can't go in with that, you know, heavy-handed approach. What you've got to do is be able to say to people, we need to change the way we work. We need to make things easier for everybody. You know, you see quite often with research grants, people get a lot of money, they come in and they have to start from scratch. You know, they have to build an infrastructure, and then at the end of 3 years, 5 years, project stops, infrastructure falls to bits, someone else comes in, starts again. So you have to start asking yourself, how can you actually build platforms and tools that allow you to do things differently, that makes everyone's lives easier, that allows you to tell stories about who you're talking to. You know, for example, the University of Edinburgh has largely moved towards .digital for doing a lot of their email marketing. And suddenly you see lots of people going, these same addresses are popping up in all these different account books. And they're going, oh, okay, actually, there are lots of links in here that we didn't know. But it's really key to convince the academics, and not just to, and you convince them by doing, not by talking, but by doing, but by building platforms that allow them to do their jobs more easily, that allow people across the university to collaborate more effectively, that allow people to show the impact that people want without saying to them, you're going to work yourself to death for 60 hours a week. Yeah. But that requires a mature discussion in many cases about the scale and the volume of what you're trying to do, and then what's the appropriate things to put in to enable that. Because you see that quite often as people go, we want these wonderful outcomes, but we're not prepared to invest in the people or the platforms to make them happen. And then that becomes a real challenge for everybody.
Yeah, Brendan, you're
Dave's right here. Additional pathways to income and impact to impact and income are alluring propositions for academics. Also, the streamlining of communication is enabled by a well-constructed and planned CRM system that's fully integrated to the strategy is critical. Now, Alan knows this story because he and I led on the implementation of it at the University of Edinburgh. We were able to pull together a system, short order, by the way, because of our experience. And during COVID, we were able to respond to Scottish government inquiries on the extent to which the university was supporting the COVID mission and businesses. In the time it's taken me to probably make this comment, it was an impressive ability where we constructed the report because we had constructed the CRM properly, and were able to report the data out in terms of number of businesses that we were touching that were COVID related. It's that ability to put the, Dave mentioned making people's lives easier. It's the ability to deal with the reporting that's so, nobody likes it, but it's been able to have that on tap, accelerated reporting for internal purposes, to the partner, to funders, to the government. It's priceless.
Oh, that's great, and it's a really good point. We just to pass back to Carrie. We're just approaching that hour mark now. So if I could pass back to Carrie for to kind of summarise and feedback from there.
Yes, nice. Thank you, Alan. It's been a very interesting session. I think one of the underlining things that came to mind is that with technology, there come many opportunities and challenges, as we have seen during this call as well, right? So it's very, very interesting. I think I learned a lot. I learned about the value of a strong alumni network and how to make that work for the university. I learned about how to make it simple with partners and how important that is, how to bring data together to create value, and my favorite, the importance of storytelling. and what impact that can have. So all of these really good points. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to Alan for moderating this session. I hope you all took away something from this as well in the audience. So this is actually a first of a series of sessions that we will be running in the education industry, focusing on issues facing the industry currently. So please watch this space to hear more about it. You can find out more information on our website, fluidogroup.com/industries. And you can also find sessions there from the interviews that we have done with the panelists, for instance, which we have also publicized in social media. So please watch those for more insights on the panelists one-to-one. And please remember that this session was recorded, and we will be sharing the recorded session with everyone who signed up. So you can look forward to that. But I think that is a wrap for the session. So thank you, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.